I guess the main point in the short 10 minutes that I've got that I would like to make is that I think we need to move to a much more diverse housing system, much more diverse neighbourhoods, so we don't have those problems. The other important issue, I think, is how do we house people with special needs? How do we house people that need supported housing in the best possible way? We had people housing institutions, in big institutions where all sorts of abuse took place, and we said that's wrong, we don't want that, we can't put up with that abuse any longer. What do we do? So in New South Wales we had the Richmond report that said people should leave institutions and go out into the community, and of course there probably wasn't the right level of supports available for them in those community settings. We really do need to have a better model about housing people with high support needs, and I think some of the really good models are actually coming out of places like the US. There's a great model I visited recently called Common Ground for homeless people, and we've kind of, like the rest of the world, sponsored a shelter system. We all appreciate the work that Matthew Talbot does, that these crisis accommodation facilities do for women escaping domestic violence, for young people who maybe come from very tough families, and for men in particular, but also women who have a whole range of mental health issues. And these shelters do a good job, but frankly it's not good enough. They actually are responsible in a way for actually churning people in and out of homelessness services, and people do fall out of that on a regular basis. So we need better models for housing people with high support needs. So one model that I saw recently was very interesting. In the 70s, New York went bankrupt. The city went bankrupt, had to be bailed out by the national government. There was an increase in crime, there was lots of street violence, prostitution. People were leaving the cities and going to the suburbs, and the economy of that place actually fell. And there's a woman there who got the city government and some private investors to buy an old hotel called the Times, 650 hotel unit blocks. And what she did there was to create a mixed housing system with the support hardwired into the building. So 50% of those 650 tenants are working people, ordinary working people who they might be actors, they might be waiters who want to be actors, but they have a job somewhere in Manhattan or in New York City, and they get a relatively cheap rent. The other 50% are people who have been homeless, who have mental illnesses, who have drug and alcohol addictions, who have fundamental challenges they're dealing with in their lives, who would otherwise be homeless, who would otherwise be in a shelter or living under a park or whatever. And what they have shown with that model is that, firstly, it's much cheaper. The most expensive accommodation is an emergency ward. The second most expensive accommodation is a prison. The third most expensive accommodation is a traditional shelter. And the cheapest option is actually a proper supported model. And what they've done there is to hardwire services into the building, support services, day activities. There's a concierge on the ground floor, a security system. That's one model of supported housing that we're going to be trialling here. But there are many other really good examples. There's examples now where working families with children are actually living in housing complexes that have people that have formerly been homeless. Now, if you had have asked me 6 months ago, would this work? I'd say, look, it's ridiculous. It's not appropriate. The families won't cop it. They'll leave. There are all sorts of risks that need to be mitigated. But in fact, where these models have had the correct amounts of supports, they've been incredibly successful at normalising people that have got very difficult challenges in their own life. So I guess that the main point I want to say is that we've gone from a system that was designed back in Gatfield, back in the tip of Manhattan, that worked very well, that mixed working people and people on very low incomes, people who might have been a single mum or a person with a mental illness or a war widow. And those places were much more normalised neighbourhoods. And I think we have residualised and we have stripped out people that have that social capital in communities. The challenge for a Labor government that believes in social justice, that believes in social inclusion and everyone having a fair go, in my view, is to move back to some of those principles so that we look after everyone, that we don't just look after one group of people, so that we don't leave people behind. And in New South Wales, it is such a great thing to have Kevin Rudd with the stimulus package, because Howard neglected this area for over a decade. More than $1 billion was ripped out of the state public housing system under Howard. He didn't agree with public housing, they didn't vote for him, he didn't want to know him, and he focused his attentions elsewhere. What what Kevin Rudd's doing in just 1 year makes up for almost a decade of neglect by the former Howard government. So our challenge at the moment is a big one. It's been made easier by the reforms Kristina's announced. People object to public housing developments on the basis of who's living there. Kristina mentioned 100 and something days. Our average is 11 months. 11 months. And the reason people are objecting is because they don't want people on very low incomes living next to them. So we've got a whole war room at Ashfield. We've got lots of activity. We've got $2 billion just in New South Wales alone to deliver 6,000 houses in the next 18 months. I met with Tanya Plibersek, our Federal Minister, just a bit earlier at lunch, and she said New South Wales is the only state that's exceeding our targets at the moment. So we're very busy delivering this stimulus. We haven't got time for Sydney Morning Herald front page stories about undermining of the state government. We're just focused on getting on and trying to make a difference to the people that we represent and who voted for us.
Yeah.